Dave Kahn from Scythia, and you guys got a new project you guys promoting. Tell me a little bit about the new album.
Well, Of Exile is a concept-based album. Deals with a sort of a king being exiled from his kingdom by one of his close advisors, and he winds up in a forest. And I guess his most trusted knights and guardsmen go looking for him, and they find him there, and he's half crazed in the forest. And the plot thickens at that point when they discover that his sword has been possessing his mind, and that even though the sword has given him many victories in the past, it's now eating him alive. And so there's a sort of a battle between the king and the sword, and then finally the king is able to cast the sword away, regroup with the warriors, and reclaim his kingdom. And then there's a song at the end that's just a big kind of fun bar song where they all go out and have a good time afterwards.
Would you say this album was made, fairly easily, or was it, a little bit harder work for this one?
I don't ever think it's hard work because it's always enjoyable. You're a musician as well, right? You're a guitar player?
Correct, yes.
Yeah. As a guitar player, I mean, I find that the guitar players are usually the ones that listen most to all the other instruments, especially when recording. They're the ones who, know what the drums should be doing, know what the bass should be doing, obviously. And then, like I do a lot of the arrangements for the music. And so every step of the process, it took time, and some things took, a little bit of going back and redoing them to get them right, to get them exactly the way we wanted them to sound. But I wouldn't say it was difficult. And the reason being for that is just because, I was so engaged in the project, and I think we all were so engaged in it that, things worked out in the end.
Would you say like the fan base also was increasing nowadays?
It's sort of interesting. The fan base has increased. Critics have been really. It's interesting to see. Some critics like the album, and there's definitely that. But some people really do not like the album at all, and it's sort of interesting because the album's a little bit of a throwback in that the production is a little bit softer than modern metal records.
Right.
There's a lot of soft passages in there, so we tried to keep more dynamic range in the music, and it almost plays like a film score in that when there's not music going, there's sound effects, so there's something to interlude between the tracks. And it's difficult trying to make a go of that in metal because I think some people just want to hear balls to the wall, fast metal, listening to albums, and this is not one of those albums.
Could it be they're just not ready for this Of Exile album?
Maybe. But, I think in the end, what's most important is how we feel about the album and how, the actual musicians feel about it. And I don't think there's any regrets. There's nothing that I do differently. Our first record, we did that too fast, and, there's a lot of things that I want to redo that we never did. But this one, I can stand behind it and say, look, I'm happy with the way it turned out.
Are you guys going to be touring this album, in 2012?
We toured, we did sort of the west half of Canada last summer, and then we're planning to go international next year. Actually, we're planning to. We got something in the works. I don't want to say too much now, but we're looking at either South America or Europe for a tour next year. And one thing we really want to do is we want to make it all the way out to the east coast of Canada.
For sure.
But there's a lot of logistics involved that we learned on our first Canada tour with getting there, and that's basically comes down to the huge distances between venues in Canada.
And that's always a big problem for a lot of bands in that sense.
Yeah, I think everyone would agree there that's ever toured Canada. Nobody has a fun time going from Winnipeg to Toronto.
I can't see it be too fun. And for a promotion for this new album, are you guys lining up some music videos along with this?
Yep. Yeah, we've got a music video that should be released in the new year. For the second track on there called Spirit of the Quest. We've got some footage as well for another music video off the album, but we're probably gonna wait a little bit and put that one out later on in 2012.
Now, Dave, would you say the visual of the band is as important as the musicianship? How would you look at that?
I think for what we're doing, it's important that we look like the content we're singing and playing about, because it's it's folk metal or it's based in antiquity. It's really important for us to look the part. So if I went up there and I was dressed in jeans and a t-shirt and I was singing about swords and sorcery and medieval warfare, I don't think people would take us as seriously as they do when we're up there in armor.
Right.
And we've got like face paint on, and we've got our armor on, and we've got all the accessories that make us look like we're stepping onto a battlefield. And I've noticed the difference in the reception since in the early days we never wore costumes, right? And since we transitioned into wearing proper costumes, it's been huge, especially for the live performance.
Now, Dave, would you say since you guys started that there's a little bit more of a trend now, like there's more people following this type of thing, like let's say for folk metal, because you guys were a very limited crowd of musicians, right? Now internationally, is there more people doing this music?
Well, it's an interesting demographic, because in Canada there's almost no folk metal bands. There's maybe 3 or 4, but most of them lean towards the Einsaferum melodic death metal side of things. And in Europe, the scene's almost oversaturated with folk metal bands, especially those coming out of Italy, Germany. Finland is a big place. Norway, of course, has a huge folk metal scene. And like from what I read in metal magazines and reviews, it's almost like there's too much of it for the fan base. And so it's interesting because some people over here who aren't aware of what's going on in Europe think that we're doing something, that's never been done before, but really we're not following the coattails of, the European bands, but at the same time, there's a lot of influence that came from that as well. I think it's an interesting reception that we get here, because in Canada and in the U.S., not a lot of people have heard folk metal, so it's new to their ears, so they're still becoming accustomed to it. And in Europe, it's almost like, we're fighting to get heard, because there's so many other bands that are doing similar things.
Well, Dave, this is going to be great to see what you guys come up with next for 2012.
Yeah, we're doing a re-release of some of our early stuff. We're doing actually a Canadian folk song from Quebec. We're recording that. It's already recorded. We're just kind of getting it together. So we're actually going to start to play some folk music from Canada, and I think that's one thing that's important, because then we're not just copying another culture's tradition or heritage. In that, we're also doing a medley as well of fantasy music.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty exciting that we're going to be releasing some of this old stuff as well as some new things. So it's not going to be a full album like of Exile. It's going to be more like a collection of songs, in that it's not going to be a concept. It's just going to be more like a regular release.
Okay. Well, Dave, you have a great end of this year and a great 2012 with Scythia. It's great to see this new album of Exile.
Thanks, Jason.